The Jeep Wrangler Diesel weighs a lot more than the gas version, and I've been concerned with all the upgrades that I've been adding that I was going to go over or almost close to payload capacity because the diesel's payload capacity is significantly reduced as well. Well, I put it on the scale. The results are in, and in this episode of Coffee One Take, we're going to talk all about Jeep weights. I got some information on some Gladiator weights, and we're going to talk about the results and how I fared. Stay tuned. Welcome to TrailRecon, I'm Brad, and today on this episode of Coffee One Take, we're talking about vehicle weights because it's a very important conversation to have. And so what I want to do is we're going to talk about just some general vehicle weights as it opposes to sprung and unsprung and GVWR and Payload. We'll talk about all that stuff. And then we'll talk a little bit about what manufacturers say the vehicle weight is and what actual weight is. And then I'll talk a little bit about my guesses on what I thought mine was going to come in at about with all the upgrades I've done to it. And then I'll tell you what the actual weight is. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the upgrades that I'm going to still do that are going to affect both positively and negatively the weight of my vehicle. So I think it's a good conversation to have. It's something that's been on my mind since the day I started adding upgrades, and I think it's something that everybody needs to consider. Whether you're building a rock crawler, you're building an overlander, or your vehicle's just a daily driver and you're putting some modifications on there, weight is something that you need to be considering. Okay, but before we dive into talking about weights, there's two announcements that I want to make here really quick. First of all, I will be at the More Overland Expo in Missouri, Springfield, Missouri, on February 13th to the 14th. Super excited. Finally a big event that we're going to be able to go to. Obviously, we're going to be social distancing and wearing masks and all that kind of stuff, but I will be there all day on Saturday and Sunday. I'll probably run around filming, but I will have my vehicle and something very special that's going to be with my vehicle. It's right here in the garage, and I still can't talk about it, but soon we will talk about that. But that will be on display there, and I'll be there talking and hopefully get the opportunity to meet and greet with a lot of you guys. It'd be awesome. I'm really excited about that. So if you're going to be in the area, come on by the More Overland Expo in Springfield, Missouri. It'd be really cool to say hello. And as we always do on Coffee One Take, I want to talk about the rig that has just stood out to me in the last week. This is probably the coolest one I've seen in a long time. And being a Navy corpsman, this one is applicable to me, a guy that loves off-roading and medicine. Let me make sure I get this right, Alex Hahn Photo, he has got this very cool Kaiser ambulance that he has been wheeling, restoring, and I've been following him on Instagram, and I gotta tell you, I've probably been to his Instagram a couple of times just checking that thing out. I mean, how cool is that thing? It would be the perfect, vehicle. I would love to, not anytime soon because I know I got enough projects, but down the road, wouldn't it be cool to have an old ambulance and go off-road it and wheel it, like a first responder vehicle off-road or something like that? I don't know. It would be fitting for an old Navy corpsman, I think. That'd be fun. But anyway, great rig. Plus, he's got some other cool stuff that he's building. Definitely go check out his Instagram. All right. Those are the two big announcements. Now, let's get into the meat and potatoes of talking about vehicle weights. So there's two weights that you hear often that are talked about, and that's sprung and unsprung weight. And so the difference between those two is that your unsprung weight is the weight of your suspension components, your wheels, your tires, your brakes, everything that is below the vehicle that's kind of moving up and down. And then you have sprung weight, and that's everything that sits on top of your suspension. So your chassis, your frame, your interior, engine, transmission, all that kind of stuff. I should mention there's probably a third kind, which is the semi-sprung, which is like a drive shaft that connects the body to the suspension. But anyway, in general, sprung and unsprung weights are the ones that people really talk about. And those are things that you need to be thinking about as you're building your vehicle because if one is heavier than the other, they have a different way of interacting. And so on like a street car or a sports car, ideally people want to have less unsprung weight. So they try to reduce the weight of the wheels and the tires and suspension because it makes it perform better, the steering is better. That's true on a Jeep with the daily driver. But on an off-road vehicle, that can have a little bit of a negative effect. If your suspension is so light that it's moving so quickly, when you're on a trail and you're on like a washboard or a rough road, it can actually make it feel a little bouncy because the suspension isn't getting an opportunity to slow down and do its job. It depends on a lot of things, a lot of factors, but I'm just speaking in generalities here. When it comes to like a rock crawler or a buggy, having heavier tires and heavier axles actually makes the vehicle more planted when they're slow rolling over the rocks, makes it the center of gravity lower on that weight, and so keeps them from feeling tipsy when they're getting off camber, and so having a little bit more unsprung weight is a positive thing. Now, overlanders typically have a lot of sprung weight, right? We're throwing roof racks up there, we're throwing rooftop tents, we got storage, all our gear. That can have a negative effect as well, because then the top of your vehicle is doing this number and it's pressing down a lot more on your suspension components, which can cause failures. It just makes the suspension not work like it should. And so those two things, sprung and unsprung weight, are things that you need to be thinking about. How much does my wheels and tires weigh, and how much does my vehicle, all my gear and stuff weigh as well, okay? Now, let's talk about what the manufacturer tells us, because there are basically three weights that we can kind of get from the manufacturer that are very important. The first one, all you do right now is most newer vehicles, you can open the door and in your door jamb, you can find a lot of this information. You can go to their website, but we'll talk about website numbers here in a second. GVWR, Gross Vehicle Weight Rating. And so that is the manufacturer says the entire weight of the vehicle with all passengers and payload and everything should not exceed GVWR. Then you have what's called payload. So that is how much payload can the vehicle hold. So how much weight in people can we put in there? How much gear can you carry with you? If it's a truck, how much stuff can you put in the rear? And so those two numbers are pretty much the ones that we consider. And then there's curb weight. So if you take gross vehicle weight rating, I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers at you, but if you take gross vehicle weight rating and you subtract your payload, what the manufacturer says your maximum payload is, and then you can also find that number inside there, we're going to talk about this, that's going to give you your curb weight. And that's just pretty much how the vehicle weighs when it doesn't have any passengers or any gear, but it should have, the curb weight does include a full tank of gas, all your windshield wiper fluids, radiator fluids, everything. That's how much the vehicle should weigh. Okay, so now that we've talked, now you understand what GVWR, curb weight, and payload are. Let's get specific here on some Jeep numbers. And we're going to talk about Wrangler and Gladiator because I was at my buddy Josh's shop and he just happened to have a gas Wrangler. So I was able to compare and contrast between my diesel, and he has a gas and a diesel Gladiator there. So I took some pictures of the numbers that were in his door frame, and we'll get to that in a second. Now, if you go to Jeep's website, and you look at the specs on a Wrangler, or pretty much any vehicle, but on the Wrangler specifically, as you go through a two-door or four-door, and you go through each of the model, whether it's a Support or a Willys or a Sahara or the Rubicon, you'll see that those weights change. And typically for a four-door Jeep Rubicon Wrangler, the GVWR, the gross vehicle weight rating, is 5,800 pounds. But they have the payload listed as 1,351. 1,351 pounds. I'll tell you right now that my Jeep and my buddy Josh's Jeep don't even come close to that. And I think the reason being is they only list a Jeep Rubicon Unlimited four-door, like no options, like soft top, and no of the interior options. Things are going to make the vehicle heavy because you start adding a hard top and all the steel bumpers and all the other stuff. That adds up quickly, and then that takes away from that payload. When you throw a hard top on there, you throw steel bumpers on there, you start reducing that payload pretty quickly, which I think is exactly what happens. So when you see that 1351 number, know that that is not for a typically outfitted Rubicon. So a curb weight of one of those Jeeps on their website is 4,449 pounds. All right, so I couldn't find anything specific on their website about the diesel, which was kind of a bummer. I mean, obviously I know from my inside door decal what my weights are, but there was nothing posted on their website. And so if you're looking at, if you want to find the 2.0 engine, the diesel, I haven't seen anything on the 4xe yet, or the 392. It'll be interesting to see what those weight ratings are when they come available. Okay, so inside my Jeep, here's what my numbers are from the manufacturer. This is bone stock. So my gross vehicle weight rating is 6,100 pounds. My payload capacity is only 800 pounds. Okay, it says on their website a bone stock Jeep is 1,351. Mine is only 800. Wow, that's a significant difference, but I do have steel bumpers, I do have the hardtop, and I'm optioned out pretty significantly. So my curb weight on the diesel, if you subtract my payload from my GVWR, is 5,300 pounds. That's a heavy beast, but you know what? The diesel handles it just fine. And we'll get into what my actual numbers were here in a minute. Don't want to lose that piece of paper because I'm pretty surprised about that. All right, now I mentioned that I was at my buddy Josh's house. And so he has a 3.6 liter Rubicon. It's a 2018, but it's optioned out pretty similarly the way that mine is. He had steel bumpers, hardtop, etc. His gross vehicle weight rating is 5,800 pounds, and that's what you expect with the gas. But his payload capacity is only 850 pounds. And that means his curb weight is 4,950. That's pretty significant. I mean, look, my diesel, my payload is only 800. His gas, his payload is only 850. You kind of think it would be reversed, right? I mean, I got a diesel, like it should be able to haul and tow more, but you're not. You can't. So that was kind of a bummer. But it was interesting to see that his payload was only 850. Now, what about for the two Gladiators that he had out there? Now, both the Gladiators are Rubicons, and they're optioned out pretty similarly. They had plastic bumpers, and he's got almost just about every option on there, both hardtops. And so make sure I get this right, for the gas one, his GVWR was 6,250 pounds, and the payload capacity was 1,174 pounds, giving him a total curb weight of 5,076 pounds. 1,174 pounds of payload, that's pretty good. If you're gonna build an overland vehicle, you wanna take your family, that's a good amount of weight. But his diesel, his gross vehicle weight rating for the diesel was 6,450 pounds. That's interesting, it's only 200 pounds more than the gas, but I know that engine weighs more than 200 pounds more, so that's pretty interesting. His payload for the diesel, 973 pounds. So the diesel Gladiator, the diesel Gladiator has 200 pounds less payload capacity than the gas one. Now again, these are just the ones sitting in his lot, and they're not identical, but they're very similar. The curb weight for his diesel, 5,477 pounds. So there you go. There's some interesting numbers. I mean, you do what you want with those numbers and say what you want, but I found that very interesting. So now what? With all those numbers, now we've started adding all kinds of upgrades. And so now those upgrades start affecting payload and the overall vehicle weight. And are we going to start, creeping into that GVWR? So before I went and got on the scale, I just kind of sat down and just kind of thought about, what upgrades I've done, and I kind of got some rough numbers. I went online and I found some true numbers on some things. And so let me just share with you what I came up with because I was off pretty significantly when this is all said and done. Some of these I know for sure what they were, but some of them I don't. So the first thing I'll talk about is the wheels. So I have the Mopar wheels, which are a little bit wider, which means they're a little bit heavier than the stock wheels. And so I just kind of estimated maybe that's an extra 5 pounds per wheel. I'm probably overestimating, so total 25 pounds. And then there's the tires. So we have the 37-inch Nitto Trail Grappler tires on there. These are some of the most heavier tires that you can buy, but they are really close to being a true 37. These are, hang on guys. These are 84 pounds per tire. Okay, to put that in perspective, the stock 33 KO2s that were on my Jeep weighed 58 pounds. So I added 130 pounds worth of rubber on my Jeep. Okay, that's a lot, especially when you're talking about rotating mass and we're talking about unsprung weight and all that. So what if I was to add, instead of the Nitto Trail Grapplers, I was to add a 37-inch BFG all-terrain. Those only weigh 70 pounds each, which is 14 pounds less per tire, which would save me 70 pounds. So I could still run a 37. It's not as aggressive and it's not a true 37 because the all-terrains are a little bit smaller. But and just like that, I could drop 70 pounds off my vehicle. Something to think about in the future. Although I will tell you, I like these tires, but I also like the KO2s. The KO2s are what I'm running on the Power Wagon right now. I like them. I like them a lot. All right, the lift kit that we added. So we added the Mopar lift kit. So the springs are a little beefier. The shocks are a little beefier. The front control arms are just a little bit longer. And so I couldn't find any true weights, so I just threw in 25 pounds. I've got the winch and the winch plate that I added. I'm giving it 75 pounds. Again, that was a guess. I've got some lights on there and a couple little accessories. We're going to just say 10 pounds. There's the roof rack, which I think weighs in at about 65 pounds. I can't find any exact weights on that. And then there is the platform and storage system. Now, I initially put 100 pounds added to that because remember that I pulled the 60% of the rear seat out and that thing was heavy. So I saved a lot of weight pulling that out there, and I think I definitely overestimated here, and we'll get to that in a second, but I said 100 pounds. And then the fridge, I did find that's 37 pounds. I have the power tank CO2 tank that's in there, and when it's full, it's 27 pounds. I've got my radio and navigation and all that stuff in there. I just said 3 pounds, I don't know, give or take. So my guess out of all of this added up was that it was going to come out to about 497 pounds. Well, I was off. I was off by quite a bit, thankfully. So I took my Jeep to my local scale here in town, and we put it on the scale. Now, before I did that, I took all my gear out of the vehicle, and I did not weigh the vehicle with me in it. And the reason for that was because I have control over all the stuff that goes in my vehicle. You know, how much gear I take with me, whether it's a day trip, a weekend trip, or a week-long trip, is going to vary. And so I really wanted to know just what the vehicle is as it sits. And look, if I need to shave weight, I'll just fast for like, a week or whatever. I could drop like 15 pounds. But I wanted to know the vehicle weight as it sits. So here we go. And I did 3 weights here because I wanted to know what front and rear axle were. So just the front axle on the scale weighed in at 2,840 pounds. The rear axle, 2,860 pounds. That's pretty good. Actually, I was very surprised at how evenly split that is because typically you want almost a 50-50 percentage from weight from one end of the vehicle, from the front end of the vehicle to the back end of the vehicle. That's pretty close. The overall weight of my vehicle came in, drum roll please, 5,680 pounds. That means I still have a payload left of 420 pounds because remember that my payload capacity was 800 pounds. So you subtract the gross weight of my vehicle from the GVWR and that gives me 420 pounds. 420 pounds is pretty significant. If I get in there with all my gear for a week-long trip, I'm not gonna be hitting 420 pounds. That's good news. The bad news that comes in is, what if my son or wife want to come with me? Well, then things get pretty narrow, right? Because when you talk about me and my son in there, and then throwing the gear in there, well, we're going to be right at the limit, right over the limit. I think it's going to depend on how much water we're carrying with us, because water is typically the heaviest thing, or if we're carrying extra fuel. Clothing and stuff doesn't weigh much, but yeah, that makes it tough. If I'm by myself, I'm good to go. If somebody's coming with me, it's going to be interesting. So we'll see. Maybe we need to downsize those tires in the future. Not going to do that right now. Okay, But what about future upgrades? So we've talked about all the upgrades we've done now and what those weights were. There's still some things that I want to do to the Jeep that are going to impact the weight positively and negatively. And so let me talk about some of those and things I'm thinking about. This is kind of the stuff that's going on in Brad's head. I have a full skilly, see, we're not editing. We don't edit in Coffee One Take. I have a full belly skid plan. I need coffee, guys. Hang on a second. I have a full belly skid pan in the storage unit that's going to get installed. It's aluminum, which is great news. I did not want to put 200 pounds of steel under there. It's an aluminum belly skid. It's going to allow me to remove a couple of pieces of steel under there. I'm pretty sure it's still going to make me net positive. But it shouldn't be terrible. I may even just go weigh it after we put the belly skid on just to see what it is. Axle shafts, so I definitely need to upgrade my axle shafts. Going to do some chromoly axle shafts here in the future. The good thing about chromoly is it's just a little bit lighter weight than steel, so I should gain a few pounds, not a lot, but a little bit. I'll take any little bit I can get. And the brakes. I do plan on upgrading the brakes on the diesel. The diesel comes with the same brakes that are on the gas Wrangler, and it weighs a lot more. And so adding all this weight, stopping power it's a safety feature. It's super important. It's not a cheap upgrade when you start looking at, like Willwood or Bear brakes. It's an expensive upgrade, but I think it's one of those upgrades that is going to be worth it. I did it on the Wrangler a couple of years ago, and I was so thankful. I say the Wrangler. I did it on the JK a couple of years ago, and it was an upgrade that I wish I hadn't waited so long to do. And so I don't plan on waiting a long time to do it on this one. But that's going to add weight. That's going to add some unsprung weight to the vehicle. Diff covers, I've already got some diff covers over there. They're a few pounds heavier than the stock ones, but that's insurance, right? I don't want to bash in a diff cover and leak fluid all over the trail or anything like that. So those are going to get upgraded. Those are a little bit heavier. And then steering components, tie rod, drag link, all those kind of things. We're going to be upgrading ball joints, all that stuff, and that's going to add more weight. So how much weight did that all add? I don't know. I haven't really sat down and added it all up, but it's going to keep climbing a little bit. So I've got 420 pounds to work with, which includes me. So it's going to be a continual balance. But I'm not upset about it. I mean, in certain countries, you might be able to do it here in the US, but I've looked online and it's hard to find a place, but you can get your vehicle recertified. You can get your GVWR recertified. When you do suspension upgrades and frame stiffening and brake upgrades and all that kind of stuff, there are companies that will, give you a higher GVWR, because when you do those things, your vehicle can handle more weight, right? When we put stiffer springs and better shocks and better brakes, and if we were to stiffen the frame, those things can have an impact on how much weight you can carry. You're not going to get that done here in the US. Manufacturers aren't going to do it, and like I said, in my search online, I couldn't find any companies that'll do it. I'm sure you could find somebody if you had enough money, but I'm not going to be doing that with the Jeep. But the good news is that we're going to do things that are going to help manage this weight a little bit better: suspension, brakes, etc. So there you have it, guys. Now you know a little bit about the dirty laundry about how much my Jeep weighs. I think it's good to know. I think everybody should know their vehicle weight. Go look at your door tags, go see what they are. In fact, here's what I'd love for you to do. Tell me what vehicle you have and tell me what your GVR and Payload are, and put those in the comments below. Wouldn't it be cool to be able to just go down in the comments and just see, oh, that vehicle is that weight and it's only got that payload, or wow, look at the payload on that vehicle. I would love to see those numbers in the comments below. That would be very cool. If you have time, do that, guys. It would be super, super cool. All right, I have been rambling for a while about vehicle weights. I need to go get ready. I got a lot to do before we head out to Springfield, Missouri. The Springfield, Missouri trip is going to be really cool because we're going to be doing some wheeling out there, having a good time, not just the event. So it's going to be a blast, and we're going to start checking off some of those 50 states. Finally. I can't wait, guys. All right. Thanks for hanging out with me in the garage, guys. We'll see you in the next video. Safe travels.